how I went from this to this. So as you can see, I have 3 Monstera Albo Variegatas and 2 Thai Constellations here. So I bought these ones from Marktplaats. If you're from the Netherlands, you'll know. But it's basically an online marketplace where you can purchase all kinds of stuff. But it also seems to be quite a good place to get some rare plants online. So as you can probably tell, some of these are a bit damaged. So we have quite a few brown spots on this Albo. And then this Thai actually got chipped really dry to me, so it's still a bit hanging. So we're gonna put it in a new pot together with the other Thai constellation. We're also going to combine these 3 Monsteras up, so we get 2 nice full plants that will grow the perfect nice new leaves, and it will become really full and lush plants. So one thing I'd like to show is the absolute thickness of this stem. So as you can see, I can barely put like my whole fingers around it. And it's actually super thick. And what's pretty cool to see with this one is that it starts really small here. So it's already quite a thick plant at the top, but it's nothing in comparison with the huge one right here. So even though this one looks quite damaged right now, with the right care, it will start pushing out big leaves quickly. Now here's the actual plan. So we're going to get this big pot for the 2 Thais. And then we're going to use one of these pots for the Monsteras. With the Monstera plants, you can actually have quite a small pot and still get a huge plant. Part of the reason for this is that we're going to be using moss poles like these, where the roots can actually grow into the pole. And this will basically work to enlarge the substrate area, so they have more places to root and can grow a lot bigger as well. These plants also don't mind being root bound too much, and they can do quite well. So one thing I always do when I'm in a hurry, so this one was kind of falling over, so I just taped the moss pole to it, and this isn't ideal, but it will work for the time being. But now it's time to get it properly potted up. Oh. Now you can see some of these aerial roots are completely dried out, but you can already see new roots sprawling from the other roots. So this one is actually already in the pot, the moss pole, and I can see some of the aerial roots started attaching. So I want to be a bit more careful. Oh, it's actually not attached yet. What's pretty cool is that you can see that this one was grown from a stem cutting. So you can see that this whole part was under the ground. But when you go down, there's actually a new stem. This didn't grow that way. There was actually a stem from another plant that got cut up, and then this new plant grew from there. I think it's also pretty cool to see the comparison of the root size of these 2 plants. This one is quite a bit more developed. Since these 2 are actually already repotted quite recently, but not really the proper way, we are going to reuse this soil to not waste any. These ones have been in this soil for a long time, so we're going to try to remove as much of the old soil as possible. For this plant, or for both of these plants actually, we're going to use quite a chunky mix. This one is called an anthurium mix. So it consists of bark, husk, perlite, cocoa and some worm castings. Now, it's always important to put a base layer of soil in. Now, we're gonna use a moss pole, as I explained earlier, and not just a moss pole. So this is one I made for another video, and also just to see how big we could get. We should try to do the world record, biggest moss pole. So I'm not going to use the whole pole, obviously, but I'm gonna try to cut it up and I use the top part. So I wouldn't recommend using such a thick one, especially at this size. But since we have a very humid area where I can put it, it won't be too hard to keep it wet. But if you would use this in your living room, it's gonna be way too hard to keep up with this. So now we're kind of ripping this pole apart. Now you can actually also do this when the plant is grown onto this to create more plants, but that's for another video. So these sticks you see are basically stabilization sticks that, because of its size, help with the stability. What would have been smart is to put this in first, but we'll manage. Especially for a pole with this size, you want to make sure that it's all the way in at the bottom. And we're gonna try to make it quite tight. Now you see that the pot is quite big for the plants, but because the pole takes up quite a bit of space, there's actually not a whole lot of soil volume left. So I really want these roots to grow into the pole. Now that we've finally gotten it out of its old pot, you can actually go quite aggressive on getting the soil out. A lot of people are scared to damage the roots, and while you shouldn't break the roots, obviously, you can still be quite sturdy with your hands and it will be just fine. So when placing it in the pot, you want to make sure that the back of the stem of the new leaf is touching the pole, because this is where new aerial roots will shoot out. So we're going to be using some tie wraps. This is not ideal because this can actually hurt the plant when it grows. But since it's only temporary to make sure the plant has a chance to attach, it's going to be fine. Because once we see the plant is attached, we'll cut up the tie wrap and it'll be just fine. Thought this would be quite an easy thing to do. Now, as you can see, this is a much different root system. The other one was really tight and clumped together, while this one just pulled out. And here you can really see like the thickness of the stem that I was talking about. Like my fingers literally cannot go around this. This is also one of the reasons why I love these plants so much. Here you can see that the variegation, which for these ties is kind of a creamy white yellow, runs through up the whole stem. And you can see it in the base of the plant. You can even see little markings here all over it, and I think it's pretty cool. But I need 2 tie wraps again. Now here you can see again that we're attaching the back part of the base of the last leaf to the pole. So this way, especially when we press it down a bit more and the sphagnum is going to be wet, it will start shooting its aerial roots into it and normal roots will grow out. Now, once all the roots are aboard, we're gonna add some final touches of soil. And I know that there are still quite a few air spaces. So we're going to be tapping the pot quite a bit to make sure the soil falls into all of those. So this really helps to move the soil down in between the roots and make sure that all the air gaps are filled up. You want to press down lightly. You don't really want to push it in too hard, as it will fall down anyway. So now that we have it in place, I made a few mistakes I'd like to touch upon. First off, this really big pole has been laying here for about half a year, so the moss got quite dry and it isn't all the way fully in just well. So I think with some watering we should be able to fix this quite easily. So what I like to do is just dump a bottle in like this. Now since the moss is so dry, it doesn't take up too well, and that's why it falls out this quickly. But if the moss was a bit more wet from the less watering, it would soak up quite nicely. But I guess this is a good start, and we'll repeat this a couple of times throughout the day to really give it a good head start. Now it might seem like the plant is really hanging over, and this is probably because of the way the plants were potted up before, but I'm pretty sure that once we have them in the light from up top, the leaves will kind of start coming up. That will look a lot nicer. And then once it grows, we will also add more moss to the top, so it will look nice and full. You can see that these 2 Monsteras have a really nice and developed root system. It's quite big, so we're going to try to get some out. It's also good to try to break up the spiraling that's happening at the bottom, because what can happen is that if you put it in like this, the new root points from where it grows might actually start spiraling up inside. This is not good. The plant will basically try to find new soil, but it will kind of suffocate. It usually won't hurt your plant, but you should try to prevent it and kind of liven up the root ball, if you will. So there's really no other way than to break some roots in this point. I'm trying to do as little as possible, but there's gonna be some breakage. A lot of people are very squeamish about, ooh, I'm touching the roots, but well, I've been handling roots like this since I can remember, and the plants are always fun. Now the cool thing here is that the inside of the root ball was actually full of soil, and the roots all kind of grow around it. So by kind of putting my fingers in, I'm able to get a lot of the soil out. Here you can see that these roots can actually get quite long. We're gonna put in a small base layer of soil. We actually have a nice see-through pot for this one. I really like see-through pots because you can watch the roots grow. I think this is just as much fun as watching the leaves grow. Again, we're gonna be using a moss pole. So this one might be a little short for the plants, but I don't have much longer ones currently. So we can always extend these later, which I'll show you in another video. Now that we have a nice and stable base, we want to make sure the moss pole is also nice and stable. And then we're gonna try kind of like making a flower bouquet, if you will, to put these plants in. And you see that if we didn't beat up the root balls so much, that this would have never fitted in. And now some people might say like you're leaving way too little space for the roots, get a bigger pot. And I respectfully disagree. I think this will actually work quite well. One nice thing about these plants is that you can see there's some kind of pointy aerial roots, and we can actually already put this into the pole and then we have some sort of stability. Now the last smaller one I will put right in the middle, and as you can see there's quite a bit of damage on the leaves. I think this is from improper care before we got them, but I'm not sure. And then we're gonna have to use a little tie wrap too. You can also use either twine or rope or something like that. But whatever you use, make sure it's easy to remove later. A lot of people like to use Velcro as well, which you can easily remove without even breaking it and reuse it. So that's probably the better option, but I don't have any currently. Tighten it up. Not too tight, obviously, but still tight enough so that, again, the back of the stem, the last leaf, is touching the pole. As again, and I like to repeat this because it's really important, the new aerial roots will come out and they'll shoot into the pole and they will root into the whole pole. And this is where you are going to get a nice and stable plant. And this is also the shortcut to getting more mature leaves quicker. I've seen this work time and time again, and I really like this method. I made it myself, but it looks pretty good, I think. Now we're going to add some more soil. And one thing you can also do if you have, like for example, Monstera or another vining plant that got too tall, is that you can cut it up halfway. Ideally only once grown into a moss pole, and then you can kind of lower the top part down so you get a more full plant, and then the new two growth points will both grow up. So again, we want to make sure to tap the plant. This might seem like it will damage it, but you have to imagine that these plants come from a jungle where there's rain, there's wind, there's all kinds of animals climbing over them. Like, they can take a bit of a beating. Now, one important thing when repotting a plant, you never want to fill the soil up to the brim, as once you're watering, the water will fall over all over your table or counter or whatever. So you always want to leave kind of a 2-3 centimeter base where the water can kind of sit before it sinks into the soil. So what I'm doing here is these aerial roots are still young enough to where you can kind of bend them without breaking them, and they're shooting out. So I'm actually going to help them a little bit and really carefully trying not to break them, putting them in like this. And this will really help give a kickstart into growing the roots here. You see, this one is a bit older and it's already quite hard to bend. So I'm not going to try to move it over because it will probably break, but we can still kind of put it into the soil like this. So now we're going to water the plants. I think it's always a good idea to water the plants just after you repotted it. 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is it helps the soil settle in and fill any loose air gaps. And reason number 2 is you can give your plants a drink. So usually when you uproot them and take them out of the old pot, you leave them out to dry for a little bit. And it will just really help get the roots settled in and start growing new roots. Now, watering moss poles is best done with a water bottle. Because it's gonna fall all around the sides, but it's already a mess, so this is a bit quicker. You don't want to put in too much water at once, as the moss can only soak up so much water. So you want to go nice and slow in the middle, and that way also the middle of the pole is going to be real humid. Now, keeping poles like these wet at home can be quite a challenge. So what we're doing is we're going to place them inside a tent with lighting, where the humidity is already quite high. Now I'm going to be filling this one up with more moss. Oh, let me do this on the floor. Oh, quite sharp. Oh, moss poles. So the interesting thing about these is that you can see that one of the ties actually has a lot more white in it, and the other one is really touching a more yellow kind of color. And especially in the new leaf here, which you can recognize by its a little bit more pale look and also because it's this shiny, that it even seems completely white. So that's pretty much it. Now, they might look a little rough still. Once they're put in a new, nice environment where the light is good, the humidity is good, and they're used to their new soil, I think there will be big leaves fast. So this pole is a little short, and as I said, we might try to extend it later. And this pole will be good for quite a long time. So a few tips I would give is to really make sure this sphagnum moss pole is kept moist. It can dry out from time to time. It might even be good to prevent any possible root rot. But it's important that most of the time it's moist so that the roots will go into it quickly. As I mentioned before, this is the key to big mature leaves. Well guys, that's it. I hope I see you back in the next video as I will share an update on these guys. See you then.